as the current COVID epidemic is concerned, we have got umpteen papers on COVID-19, not only the pathophysiological mechanism, and especially, more importantly, neuro-COVID itself. Recently, I was just going through the neuro-COVID articles, even under print also. I think I have had more than 60 articles on neuro-COVID now, which some of them are not published. And the mechanism underlying it, for example, why they get to the neurological problems, especially the myositis, to the encephalopathy, seizures, Guillain-Barré, whether it's a peripheral, we have got explanation for everything. And good articles have come. Similarly, many articles have come on the psychiatric aspects of COVID. Basically, when the COVID epidemic comes, without any problems, only the worried well syndrome, people are worried without having a problem. Those people who are undergoing psychiatric treatment, they can have a flare-up of the illnesses. They can have a new onset of psychiatric problems. And compounded with the economic burden, financial strain, social distancing, isolation, quarantine, etc., adds to this. Not only in, and also it's a big problem, challenge, especially in elderly population, also in pediatric population, especially school-going children. Multiple psychiatric problems have been investigated, and umpteen papers are there. But we are not going to discuss all these things today. We are talking about some of the drugs that we are using, not only the psychotropics, but also some of the drugs which are used in neurology. Madhu will be able to really expand it further if there is a need. And when the questions usually comes, can we give psychotropic medication during COVID? Number one. Answer is yes and no. Yes means if it is a mild to moderate condition, if there's a comorbid situation, you can judiciously give psychotropics provided you know about the drug-drug interactions. And also in a severe condition, COVID, nobody will venture onto aggressive psychiatric management because patients will not die of psychiatric disorders except for suicidality, etc. That's something different. That there are mechanisms described because this thing. But otherwise, you have to think of COVID. COVID psychopharmacology, especially people use antiviral agents, steroids, and some people use chloroquine. So in France, some people use colchicine. And COVID and thrombosis, there's a risk. Some people say whether we have to give blood thinning agents, whether we have to give antiplatelets, deaggregation drugs, etc., and their interactions. But when we talk about it, whether you require the drugs, and when you require the drugs, how will you judiciously select the drug? For example, if a patient is on clozapine, will you continue it? Will you reduce it? What are the problems? Similarly, suppose you are giving with an antiviral agent, what are the drug-drug interaction? For example, suppose you give chloroquine and remdesivir. The remdesivir's effect is nullified by chloroquine. These some of the things I think Avinash will discuss. And for the audience information, there is a new article which has come in April 2021 on the COVID-related psychopharmacology and the drug interaction. Avinash will discuss on it. Another good article which has come, which is also COVID psychopharmacology, which has come in BMC Psychiatry. Another one sometime back, we have also written that he might be mentioning that Avinash, myself, and our WPA President Afzal Javed, we have published it. Before that, there's a beautiful review in Psychosomatic Journals. Without much ado, I will not really give a lecture on what all things. Avinash will be able to answer almost, deal with everything. And if there are some questions, we will discuss later. Dr. Madhu will contribute if there is a need from neurological side. I shall try to give some inputs, whatever the recent developments, if at all anybody wants it. So back to Madhu, and Madhu, if he agrees, we can straight away go to Avinash.
Yeah, okay. I think it's without wasting time, we can straight away go to Professor Avinash for his much awaited lecture. That is better. If the neurologic doubts come, I can intervene later on.
Yes. Are my slides visible? I think yes.
Yes, sir. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Fine. Good evening, everyone, and a very big thank you to Professor Dr. Mohandas and Dr. Madhusudanan, and of course all the others for having me here. My talk is going to be on psychotropics and COVID-19, particularly prescribing and management. So I'm not going to go into details of what COVID is, but rather I'm going to talk about straight for the psychiatrist what matters and what doesn't matter. Key question, why are we discussing COVID-19 and psychotropics? That's a very important thing to understand. We are discussing COVID-19 and psychotropics because we have 3 or 4 groups of patients who we see. One is we may have psychiatric patients who are already suffering from psychiatric issues. So they're patients who have depression, who have bipolar disorder, who have anxiety disorders, who are on psychiatric medication. And let's say they develop COVID-19 and then have to be prescribed medications which are important from a COVID perspective. We also may have patients who develop COVID and then develop psychiatric issues and psychiatric symptoms because there are many neuropsychiatric manifestations of COVID, and we may be called upon to treat them. So we then probably will again have to know about how psychotropics interact with the drugs used in COVID. We may have many patients in the ICU treated for COVID who may get aggressive, may get violent, may get delirious. And at those times, we may be called to see these patients. So we're going to look at how psychotropics interact with COVID, what matters, what doesn't matter. I have tried my best to cover everything. I've been given a set of questions which were asked before the meeting started. So I've tried to include that in my slides as well. But if there are any things which I haven't covered, I'll be more than happy to answer on them. What's very also important when it comes to psychotropics and COVID is that there's a huge interaction between COVID drugs sometimes, pre-existing psychiatric disorder and pre-existing medical disorder. So you also have a group of patients where they get COVID. They're already on psychotropics because they have psychiatric issues. They're already on antihypertensives, oral hypoglycemics, cholesterol-lowering agents because they have a medical problem. And all these 3 may interact. So we need to know about that also. We do not have many specialized COVID units for psychiatric patients. So therefore, we may be called to COVID units as a part of their team. And yes, there are neuropsychiatric manifestations like I discussed. I straight away moved to some specific drugs, and then we will go into certain general aspects also. When we look at clozapine and COVID, there's been a huge amount of literature written on clozapine and COVID because the worry has always been that If I have a patient who is maintained on clozapine and doing very well and is symptom-free or has very few residual symptoms, and let's say he develops COVID, do I remove clozapine? Do I reduce clozapine? Do I change him to another drug? Will that cause a relapse of his symptoms? So the main concern is whether I continue clozapine therapy. And if I continue it, with what precautions do I continue it? There is no major drug-drug interaction reported with clozapine and drugs used in COVID like remdesivir or favipiravir or any of the proteases. But what's very important is that one of the key factors is that whether getting COVID, does it accentuate or increase the chance of clozapine-induced neutropenia and agranulocytosis developing? Because the concern is COVID sometimes on its own may induce neutropenia, may induce low counts. So then in such a case, would clozapine further augment the low counts and cause a further decrease in the counts? We don't have studies on this, but most authorities have suggested that we continue clozapine therapy while we continue monitoring the counts. We have to become a little more stringent with our counts. I remember some years back a paper published in the Indian Journal of Psychiatry that mentioned that many practitioners are not very stringent when it comes to monitoring neutrophil counts and WBC counts with clozapine because they've used the drug a lot, they're confident with the drug, and they keep giving clozapine. Counts reducing have been reported, but monitoring is not as stringent as the textbook mentions. Monthly, 2-monthly monitoring, there are practitioners who definitely do it, but it's not stringent. But if you have a patient with COVID and you have him already on clozapine, please monitor the counts weekly, monitor the counts as often as the COVID team would want it monitored, because that's something which is important. Also inform the COVID team about clozapine-induced neutropenia and agranulocytosis because they should know about it. A very important facet which also has been evoked with clozapine is that at higher doses, above 400 mg, the risk of seizures increases. And if someone develops high fever and neuropsychiatric manifestations or neuro-COVID has been linked to seizures and epilepsy. So the concern is that whether keeping him on a high dose of clozapine while having COVID, would it induce seizures? So they say normally, yes, if you want, you could reduce the dose of clozapine a bit if there is high fever and COVID symptoms are present so that the seizure doesn't happen. But the guidelines basically say that in patients who do not have what we refer to as an etheric neutropenia, we monitor. If the WBC count is more than 3,500 and neutrophil count is more than 2,000, we don't really worry so much. If it goes down around to say probably less than 3.5, but about 3, then we sort of monitor, increase the frequency. And if it's less than 3, then we stop clozapine and look to switch to some other antipsychotics. Another huge bunch of literature which has come up with the onset of COVID is about lithium. And lithium is one drug which is a concern in COVID patients because a lot of our medications that we use for COVID and for the management of COVID are cleared renally. They are metabolized through the kidneys. Lithium is also a drug which is metabolized through the kidneys. So a huge concern is about how do you monitor lithium in a patient with COVID. So COVID sometimes may also cause an acute kidney injury, particularly if you have multisystemic kind of manifestations which have been reported. So normally they say you need to monitor lithium levels very stringently. Normally you would do it over once the patient is maintained. We may not monitor so often, but we have to be very stringent when a patient develops COVID. Lithium also has a number of drug interactions with multiple drugs. It is known to cause certain changes to the plasma levels of the retroviral drugs, particularly favipiravir and the other drugs which we use here, not so much with remdesivir. So one has to be careful when you're using those kind of drugs. You also need to monitor lithium if you're introducing corticosteroids. So it's preferable to stop lithium. What they've also said is if you're giving for the fever, ibuprofen or paracetamol, paracetamol is a safer bet when it comes to lithium versus ibuprofen. One has to be very careful. Generally, when a patient with COVID develops flu, then the chances of lithium toxicity increases. So one has to make sure that fever, sweating, tremors that come up during a flu with COVID is not actually lithium toxicity, which is manifesting. So one needs to then monitor all the more. But otherwise, you can continue lithium, but they say with a lot of caution. If you can avoid it, preferably avoid it. Patients who are at a higher risk for monitoring when they develop COVID, particularly and are on lithium, include patients who are elderly, patients who are children and adolescents, patients who already have some kidney disease. The baseline calcium at the time of admission, if it is raised, then you need to monitor lithium more stringently. Patients with coexisting thyroid disorders, you need to monitor lithium stringently. Patients who have been very poorly adherent to lithium or not monitored lithium levels, then you need to monitor again. You look for drugs that interact with lithium. There's a huge list. I'm not going to go there. It's beyond the scope of our talk today. And serum lithium levels above 0.8 millimoles is when we probably look at monitoring lithium to a great extent. A third drug on which a lot of literature has come up is benzodiazepines and their use in COVID. Well, the main concern with the use of benzodiazepines in patients with COVID has been respiratory depression, whether benzodiazepines would induce or further accentuate the respiratory depression caused by COVID, whether benzodiazepines would be detrimental in a patient with COVID who develops pneumonia. Should you give it? Should you not give it? The issue of sedation comes up. And because the patient is sedated, would you sometimes not be able to monitor the respiratory depression that happens? And the patient may not be in a position to tell you that he's experiencing breathlessness and shortness of breath. The key issue that comes up is COVID itself is a diagnosis that evokes fear and anxiety. A lot of patients with COVID develop panic attacks. A lot of patients with COVID develop anxiety. A lot of patients with COVID in the ICU develop panic, particularly when they have patients around them who are dying or because of the whole ICU environment. The issue is, if you get a panic attack in a patient with COVID, would you prescribe clonazepam? If his PO2 levels are fine and his respiration is fine, you can go ahead and give it. There is nothing stopping. But if a patient has PO2 levels which are low, there is a component of respiratory depression. He has a prior history of lung disease. If he's a prior patient who has chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, then in those patients, one has to be a little careful. How long do we give it? If you give it, they say give it for 2 or 3 weeks, not more than that. And it has to be given acutely. It may also be given on an SOS basis. Literature says there are drugs like oxazepam and lorazepam, which are preferred in the ICU setting rather than clonazepam or alprazolam. And the longer acting benzodiazepines have to be avoided. Chlordiazepoxide you preferably avoid in patients with COVID. When you look at antidepressants and COVID, all antidepressants have been labeled as being pretty safe. However, you need to monitor all antidepressants when given to a patient with COVID. One has to be very careful with the use of tricyclic antidepressants. Tricyclics on their own may be efficacious for the management of depression, but they have a lot of side effects like dry mouth, constipation, blurring of vision, multiple symptoms that come up, the anticholinergic side effects that may also sometimes accentuate the delirium process of COVID. So one has to be careful when it comes to using tricyclics. The SSRIs are all said to be safe. In fact, the SSRIs may in fact help indirectly because they may help ameliorate the cytokine storm that happens in COVID. There have been no particular preferences, though sertraline has been weighted higher than fluoxetine and escitalopram, but sertraline and escitalopram are the preferred SSRIs. SSRIs are supposed to be safer than SNRIs in COVID. Though duloxetine and venlafaxine or desvenlafaxine has been used, they've still said preferably use an SSRI over an SNRI. Bupropion, there are some case reports that you should ideally not use it in patients with COVID because one is it has some interactions with the protease inhibitors. You may need to give a higher dose of bupropion. Seizure risk with bupropion is also there, so one needs to be careful. The drugs that have been labeled to be pretty safe in studies have been sertraline, milnacipran, and vortioxetine. There's a recent report that has made the rounds of many WhatsApp groups and literature that fluoxamine may be beneficial in COVID, but this is preliminary data, and practically all SSRIs are known to help ameliorate cytokine storms because cytokine abnormalities are also seen in depression. So therefore, they say that SSRIs as a whole are effective. When it comes to antipsychotics and COVID, One is the worry is if you already have a patient who's on antipsychotics, whether antipsychotic induced adverse events would be accentuated by COVID. The issue here is, yes, they say there's a risk that it may be. Many patients with COVID have fever. So if you're already having them on antipsychotics, the worry is whether they would develop an EPR-like reaction or whether they would develop a neuroleptic malignant kind of reaction. These are things that are worrisome. The other worry with antipsychotics is the sedation and the effects on QTC prolongation. One of the things which has been mentioned very clearly is that you have to use risperidone with a lot of caution in patients with COVID, because the chances of EPR are, of course, higher with risperidone. And apart from that, risperidone has drug-drug interactions with favipiravir and the protease inhibitors, so one has to be careful. Olanzapine is our first choice, particularly if we have to use something for delirium and aggression, and as a sedative, you could use olanzapine. Paliperidone is supposed to be safer than the other drugs when you look at the cytochrome profiles. Because of the QTC prolongation, you would avoid drugs like ziprasidone and Sertindole. Oral haloperidol is preferably avoided, but in an ICU setting, you would prefer to use injectable haloperidol, monitoring it. The concern here that happens is when you give first generation antipsychotics and whether you would give trihexyphenidyl with it or not, because the anticholinergic side effects with trihexyphenidyl and the effect on delirium again comes up. You may develop an anticholinergic induced delirium, which could sometimes be difficult. So the ICU management is preferably IV antipsychotics. Quetiapine has been said to be successfully useful. In fact, haloperidol, they say, in an intravenous form is useful in COVID because it works via the sigma receptor mechanism, which is useful when it comes to COVID. You also have to give sometimes antipsychotics because a lot of our COVID drugs may cause psychosis as a side effect. And it has been seen that patients who are already on antipsychotics, because they are known cases of psychosis or schizophrenia and they develop COVID, they somehow do not develop COVID drug-induced psychosis, like which may be caused with chloroquine or HCQS or at times with azithromycin. So they do not develop the drug-induced psychosis. The key question also that happens is that if you have a patient with second generation antipsychotics and he develops COVID, would the chances of developing metabolic syndrome, if not developed so far, increase? They say there's a risk because of the cytokine storm. We don't really have data on it. Similarly, the chances of developing diabetes post-COVID is also higher, but we don't really have a risk data for it. When we look at mood stabilizers in general and COVID, we already discussed that lithium is a major concern. What most studies tell us is that we have to reduce the dose of carbamazepine, because carbamazepine via its cytochrome interactions may sometimes lead to an increase in the dosages of the proteases. Whereas when it comes to valproate and lamotrigine, we may have to increase the dose. Now the worry here is with lamotrigine, if you're increasing the dose, while we know that the skin rash is not dose dependent, one still has to be particular and monitor. So one of the questions which was asked was, what is the best mood stabilizer to be used in COVID? Well, I would put my money on lamotrigine or valproate or divalproex rather than carbamazepine or oxcarbazepine. Another question asked by doctors was whether COVID could cause mania. There have been anecdotal reports of patients developing manic-like symptoms or aggressive symptoms, but COVID-induced mania has not frankly been reported. Even when it comes to gabapentin, one has to be a little careful. You have to adjust the dose a bit, making sure that there's not a huge amount of GABA pumped into the system. But at the same time, gabapentin needs to have a slight reduction in dose when you're giving it in patients with COVID. When you look at psychotropics and COVID-19 drugs, there are a huge number of drug-drug interactions. These drug-drug interactions happens because of the cytochrome P450 mechanism that works. There are also pharmacodynamic drug-drug interactions that happens because of the additive or synergistic activity of these drugs. They can also happen because of the stage or severity of disease of COVID. And there are pharmacogenetic issues, that is the individual response to cytochrome P450. What is very important is that there are clinically relevant drug interactions that happen between psychotropics and COVID-19 agents. They happen because of pharmacokinetic or dynamic properties. And what's also very important is they may be caused by the impact of moderate to severe forms of COVID, which could lead to a multi-organ failure or a cytokine storm. So the cytokine storm, the amount of multi-organ failure is an important factor that affects these drug-drug interactions. So if you look at lopinavir, ritonavir, favipiravir, darunavir, or cobicistat, these are drugs which pose a major concern. All the protease inhibitors pose a major concern of clinical relevance with psychotropic agents. They normally say that concomitant administration of these inhibitors with haloperidol, quetiapine, ziprasidone, carbamazepine, midazolam, triazolam. Midazolam, triazolam we may not use so much, but haloperidol, quetiapine, ziprasidone we do use, should be avoided because of increased toxicity. They also say that a low risk of clinically relevant interactions happens with other drugs like corticosteroids and antipsychotics, heparin and antipsychotics, immunomodulators like tolmicitab and the anti-JAK drugs, and remdesivir. Psychotropics which exhibit a favorable profile, that is sertraline, bortioxetine, milnacipran, olanzapine, paliperidone, oxazepam like benzodiazepines, should be preferred over other drugs. So if you look at this graph, which is derived, which has been borrowed from an article which I'll share with you shortly, the early stage of COVID, we have drugs like ritonavir and all the others used. So you would normally use your normal therapies. So this is how the psychiatric therapies and COVID therapies interact. So initially you may have to give antipsychotics, you may need sedation. If the patient has very mild COVID, you would maintain him on the treatment he's already on. In the ICU, you may need sedation, you may need to manage delirium, and the patient would be on tocilizumab and the other drugs like corticosteroids and other drugs. So you have to look at drug-drug interactions at every stage. What's also very important is if you look at mild to moderate COVID and moderate to severe COVID, now if you look at it, how do you choose? So if you look at antidepressants, QT prolongation is seen with several antidepressants and antiretrovirals. The oral antidepressants are generally stopped in ICU patients because they are generally sedated. Giving an antidepressant at that point may not really be of much help. When you look at antipsychotics, co-administration of haloperidol and quetiapine with antiretroviral should be avoided. But parenteral haloperidol is important. You have to increase it when you're using anti-interleukin drugs. Mood stabilizers, co-administration of carbamazepine should be avoided. Co-administration of midazolam should be avoided. Increase the dose of intravenous midazolam if you're using. And you also would reduce COVID-19 agents use if you're going to use carbamazepine. And prefer oxazepam like benzodiazepines. This is a very important chart, and I will share this article with you. What's very important here is if you look at column number 3, where remdesivir is, I'm sorry if the font is not very clear, but column number 3 where remdesivir is. Now, if you look at the blocks, the squares are all yellow and green, which means there are very low risk or low risk drug-drug interaction. Remember, you can use almost every psychiatric drug very safely if a patient is on remdesivir. You don't need to worry about it. Another drug which is very important for us is tocilizumab. Now, if you look at tocilizumab, if you look at the second last column, now the second last column is tocilizumab, which is used in COVID. It's all green. So that clearly indicates that all our psychiatric drugs are very safe when it comes to using it. There's a very low risk. Though you monitor, there's a very low risk. Similarly, if you have a patient on low molecular weight heparin, you would be a little, it's all green. So these 3 columns give us a good idea that, in India, particularly with tocilizumab and remdesivir, we have to be a very, quite secure when it comes to using our psychiatric drugs. Whereas if you look at lopinavir, ritonavir, favipiravir, all those retroviral groups of drugs, which are the first 2 columns, yes, we have quite a few oranges and reds over there, particularly fluoxetine, paroxetine, risperidone, carbamazepine, like we already said, alprazolam, midazolam, the shorter acting benzodiazepines, preferably you won't use. Diazepam and lorazepam are safer, oxazepam is safer. So that's how we would look at it. So this is one of the papers which is very, very important, and I think everyone should read it. If you want to have a copy of it, I'll be more than happy to share it with you, which is a paper by Gatti et al. It's come in the April 20, this is in the 2021 issue of CNS drugs, where they talk about clinically significant drug interactions between psychotropics and the COVID-19 therapies. And every agent is dissected from a cytochrome perspective, which, you can go through at your leisure. Another very important is the Ostuzi article, which came in the BMC Medicine 2020 that looks at the safety of psychotropic medications. That's a slightly older article. References are slightly lesser compared to the 2021 Gatti et al. Article. If you look at the psychopharmacology of COVID, another article by Bilbul, which is an older, much older article, came in early 2020 when the COVID hit us in psychosomatic medicine, which also looks at some points, which is vital. Well, this is our moment, a bit of a hall of fame for us, where a paper written by me, Dr. Mohandas and Dr. Javed was published in the British Journal of Psychiatry, wherein we've looked at critical issues in treating COVID-19 positive psychiatric patients in low and middle income countries. It's a paper that has received a lot of recognition. We've also published challenges with regard to psychiatric treatments in low and middle income countries in the Asian Journal of Psychiatry, and the interface of psychiatry and COVID-19, which has been published in a local journal, but nevertheless important. Now, when we also look at psychotropics in COVID-19, what is very important that the risk and severity of these drug interactions should always be assessed while you take into account the additional vulnerability related to the medical condition. So you need to look at his medical condition also. Don't just go by drug-drug interactions. If he needs to have something for agitation, he needs to have it. If he needs to have something for sedation, he needs to have it. So you assess patient by patient. There's no blanket rule here that give this or don't give this or don't do this. You have to assess with depression and COVID, a few points is that the sedative potential of the drug use is very important. So if you're using drugs with less sedative potential, the chances of your respiratory depression are always less. So choose your sedative, their oxygen levels. So their PO2 is very important. A patient with pre-existing respiratory conditions like asthma or COPD or a past history of TB or a past history of a CA, which is recovered, is always going to be at a higher risk. So look at any lung pathology that was already there. The worry with many of our psychotropics is that they may cause reduced motility of the respiratory diaphragm, they may cause reduced motility of the respiratory muscles, they may cause CLORE as a side effect, and aspiration may happen. But other than that, we evaluate case by case. When we look at QTC prolongation, what's very important is QTC prolongation causing intrinsic of the antipsychotic has to be looked at, whether there are other drugs from the retrovirus that also increased QTC. But most importantly, is there a pre-existing cardiovascular condition? So patients with a pre-existing cardiovascular condition like an arrhythmia or other cardiovascular conditions would be at a higher risk. So one has to be a little particular when you sort of monitor this. You need to have a regular ECG and a baseline 2D echo as well. Serum electrolytes have to be monitored always throughout when you're looking at QTC prolongation. A very important issue, and a lot of questions on this come on coagulation bleeding. Now, what's very important to know is in people with COVID, both antipsychotics and antidepressants increase the risk of thromboembolism in the elderly. There's a slight increase in the risk. It doesn't mean that everybody receiving the drugs would get thromboembolism. But what's very important is in a patient with COVID taking heparin, low molecular weight heparin or heparin, antidepressants might increase the risk of bleeding with a higher risk with SSRIs in elderly patients. Again, both these risks are more in the elderly than in the younger group. So you need to monitor regularly. They don't say do not administer these drugs. Please give these drugs with monitor. What's very important is that you also have to look at the pre-existing bleeding and coagulation profile. So you can't just really monitor this overnight. You have to have the pre-existing coagulation profile and bleeding profile is to be looked into. Now, if you look at the COVID-19 medications, do we have side effects which are psychiatric caused by them? Remdesivir has known to have no neuropsychiatric side effects except depression in some patients that has been reported post-Remdesivir. There are no case reports of Remdesivir-induced psychosis. Colchicine has been known to cause depression as a side effect. Again, there are no reports of colchicine-induced psychosis which have been reported. Favipiravir, which has been used a lot in the Indian scenario, is known to induce depression. All retrovirals are known to induce depression as a side effect. Psychosis, again, is very rare and hardly reported with favipiravir. Chloroquine and HCQS, on the other hand, can cause both depression and psychosis. Chloroquine-induced psychosis, we all know, and we all have treated patients, I think, in our lives. In fact, I think Dr. Mohandas has the highest number of case reports on chloroquine-induced psychosis, which he's published. Plasma therapy has no psychiatric side effects. With corticosteroids, again, the risk of psychosis and depression are both there depending on the steroids used, the dosage used. With immunosuppressants, the chances of depression are there. COVID is a viral illness. Any viral illness can induce psychosis and depression far more than psychosis because of its effect on the entire cytokine mechanism. So one has to be aware of that. A key question which has been asked is, are our psychiatric drugs safe to be given with the COVID vaccine? Yes, all of them are safe. There's no contraindication to the COVID vaccine in a patient with any psychotropic agent. You can give it very safely, and there's no need to stop the drug before, there's no need to stop the drug after. The vaccine can be given very safely, and there's no need to worry at all. I end my presentation here, and we take time for questions. While I thank the audience, I think I would also like to take this platform to thank everyone who's been a savior to all of us during COVID. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Avinash, sir. So the presentation was very in-depth, insightful, excellent, and I think you touched on all the aspects, covered up most of the queries that we had in the beginning of the program. Thank you very much. Now the floor is open for question answer. Before that, Madhusudan sir, if you can give your comments.
I would just congratulate Dr. Avinash for his excellent talk. He has covered almost all the aspects, both in the drug interactions and the drugs which can be given, which cannot be given. I think it's a fantastic lecture he has given. Thank him once again for his nice lecture. Mohandas sir, you are coming.
Yeah, as you a friend of mine, a colleague, and I know that he will do good, and he has done good. And we work together in many areas anyway. Because if at all I want to write something, I will tell Avinash, I will send the paper, you draft it, and I will correct, edit it, and do it. We are on the, that way, he is very helpful to me. COVID, there is interleukin, that cytokine storm, interleukin 6 is very high. That itself will suppress the cytochrome enzyme system, especially 3A4, 1A2, and C19, which are relevant for our psychopharmacology. So we have to be a little bit careful when we think of the drugs which are metabolized through this enzyme rather than the drug interaction. That is important. So you may have to be careful when you adjust the medicines. And secondly, at least 50% when we give with ritonavir. The reason is block the P450 enzyme inhibition, it will increase the level. On the other hand, carbamazepine is a cytochrome inducer. P450 inducer. Carbamazepine, phenobarbital, phenytoin, etc. They are inducers. So whenever we give some drugs together with that, that will flush out the other drugs. Everybody knows it, except valproic acid, which is, and lamotrigine, which are not really metabolized to that. Lithium is not at all metabolized to liver, so don't worry about it now. P450 interaction. He has beautifully talked about the lithium drug interaction, which if anybody is interested, you can go back to the general psychiatry. I have written my review on lithium in special population. You can go through it, and everything is being given. Now, regarding COVID vaccine, when we give COVID vaccine, yes, almost all psychiatric patients they can go ahead with COVID vaccine. Except whenever the patient is on clozapine, always try to do a hemogram and Also, antidepressants for your consumerist side, better to do a coagulation time. I usually, when they are on higher dose of clozapine, you can go ahead with that, but always do a that is important, and also the ECG. That also I suggest because we should not be putting whatever may be think clozapine high doses we don't need. And he has told, Avinash has told that more 500 to 600 milligram clozapine can induce seizures. But there are so many reports on even clozapine 200 milligram producing seizures. Though earlier it was told clozapine is a limbic anti-epileptic in the lower dosage, but cortical epileptogenic agent in the higher dosage. Anyway, that's all theory. But we have got reports. So whenever we get in a patient with COVID, first of all, we have to see whether it's a neuro-COVID, COVID-related one, or whether it's a clozapine related. So whenever we do it, we have to discuss with the internist or the neurologist. These are the possibilities and document it. And you have to titrate down and for an alternative. Like
ಈ ತಗೊಡಿನ ನೀವು ಪಾಟೀಲ್ ಸರ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ರೂಮ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿನ ಈ ತರ ಓಕೆ ಪ್ಲೀಸ್ ಈ ತರ ಕ್ಲೋಸ್ ಬೇಡ ಪರವಾಗಿಲ್ಲ
Yeah, I think there is some network issue at Mandas.
Okay. Chintan, I will start taking the questions which are there, I think. Dr. Nanawala has asked, what about excessive salivation with clozapine? Can it complicate respiratory problems? I think I've already Dr. Nikita has asked that patients on TCA develops COVID, do we continue the drug? The answer is, if he's maintained and there are no major side effects with the TCAs, you could continue the drug. But otherwise, if there are side effects that come up, they believe that oral haloperidol acts with the protease inhibitors and causes their levels to reduce, and it can induce some amount of EPR sometimes in the COVID state with high fever. That's the worry. Dr. Sukumaran mentioned that there was a reservation about my advice to give IV haloperidol in COVID. Well, sir, I also totally agree with you. I would not want to give IV haloperidol or IM haloperidol in COVID because and all the tendencies, that absolutely come up. Based on what the articles said, I mean, frankly, I would prefer to give olanzapine in the melt form. It works far better and it's far safer for the management of, delirium. So, and also the risk of QTC prolongation is minimal with olanzapine. Another question which is asked is IM haloperidol and olanzapine a better option than IV? Yes, definitely. I would always prefer IM to IV. There's no doubt on that. Another question is that if antidepressants increase the risk of thromboembolism and bleeding, can you enlighten us on this more? Well, so that would be a separate talk altogether. If you look at, antidepressants and bleeding, I wouldn't mind doing it at another day, definitely. Any reference which can quote about the safety of COVID vaccines in psychotropics? There are references. I would send you that no psychotropics interact with the COVID vaccine per se. Dr. Jamshir wants to know, does ivermectin have any interaction with psychotropic drugs? No, sir. In the search, I was not able to find any major interactions of ivermectin. In fact, it's a very safe drug on its own also. There weren't major side effects seen with ivermectin. What's the role of melatonin in COVID delirium? I haven't really used melatonin in COVID delirium, so I wouldn't know. Melatonin would work, I mean, as a sedative if you feel that the sleep-wake cycle has been altered, it would work to some extent. But I don't think as a sedative, it would be a very powerful sedative. So I don't think I would, want to use melatonin in COVID delirium. Dr. Singhal writes that. Yes,
Avinash,
sir. Please.
Avinash, can I just interrupt
Yes,
here?
yes, sir. Yeah.
Melatonin is not US FDA approved drug. It is only a nutritional type of product. So the drug interaction, we don't do it. But many people give melatonin as a 3 milligram. It's not harmful. Okay, and ivermectin, I fully agree. Intramuscular haloperidol, I may not suggest in COVID patient. If there is a COVID patient, better to avoid haloperidol. If at all needed, as you have rightly told, olanzapine, even liquid form. The problem is COVID can produce myopathies, myositis, pain, so we may not be able to differentiate. Similarly, COVID has been correlated with NMS type of picture, so we won't venture to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, hello, that is the current situation. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
For
No, sir, no problem. Dr. Singhal has asked that we use enoxaparin repeatedly in our patients, both in the COVID ward and the ICU. So I think SSRIs and enoxaparin, there have been some interactions which have been reported, but other than that, no major interactions with antipsychotics. What is my choice of an antidepressant in a COVID patient who's also on immunosuppressive drugs? Well, I think I would put my money on an SSRI first, and then, second choice would be an SNRI or something like that. But sir wants to add something. Yeah.
Yeah, by SSRI, preferably not citalopram and escitalopram. And the reason is there are some reports of QTc prolongation. And even all the antiviral agents have been known to produce it. So better you do it from the, as such, no problem. But as there are some reports, better to prefer, as Avinash has suggested, other drugs, SSRIs other than escitalopram or even citalopram, we don't use it. QTc prolongation. Sorry.
Yeah. What is the role of mirtazapine in post-COVID patients with normal parameters? I think if the parameters are normal and the patient is fine, you could use as an antidepressant anyway. But the one concern with mirtazapine has been sedation sometimes, which we have to be careful about. We come across many patients on clozapine going into delirium after COVID. Would be the, sir, Dr. Andas, if you would want to give some insight.
No, two things. Mirtazapine is a modest antidepressant even post-COVID. The routine dosage is 15 to 45 milligram, but many people give only for a sedation, as he has rightly told, though it is a contraindication, is good. And people know about the California cocktail and other thing. I don't want to discuss much on that. Secondly, clozapine can produce delirium in those patients. Never continue clozapine in a COVID. Never continue. And clozapine, somebody has asked about siloria. Absolutely correct. When there's clozapine into siloria, please avoid clozapine because they may swallow and they can have pneumonitis. So preferably clozapine because patients can die of pneumonia or COVID complication. They are not going to die of psychiatric complications. So be careful about that. In an ICU and I think don't be that much adventurous. So we do not have literature on it, but why do we want to be adventuristic? Similarly, in lithium stabilizer, well maintained. In a COVID situation, if there's something, because as Avinash has told, lithium has got so much drug-drug interaction, and COVID can produce multi-systemic dysfunction. Why do you want to continue that? No need. And he has told valproic acid or lamotrigine. Even in my, I won't even continue anything. Instead, I will continue with olanzapine or even small dose of antipsychotic, lower dosage, and wait for them to recover from COVID. This might take it. Okay, even if they relapse, no problem. And then regarding one question, thrombosis, there are articles on venous thromboembolism, reviews are there on antipsychotics, especially quetiapine, etc. We do have reviews. We can even share if somebody is interested. Antidepressant, not much. Antidepressant induced bleeding is also very minimal. Last time or something I have told, Gellenberg was the first person who has reported on it, and because of its platelet deaggregation property. So is it going to be good for COVID patient? Theoretically, yes, because of the COVID thrombosis connection, it may be beneficial. But however, when a patient is on the deep platelet drugs, for example, double platelet drugs, when you give SSRIs, little bit careful. You have to be there. You have to, because bleeding chances may be high in some of these patients. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think we've taken up all the questions that have come in the chat. So,
Yeah, the question is, will COVID infection lead to cytochrome inhibition? I have already told COVID itself will produce interleukin excess that will suppress the enzymes, especially 3A4, 1A2, and C19. It will not interfere with 2D6 because 2D6 enzyme is only 6% of the condition. And most of our antidepressants, more than 50% are metabolized through 3A4. And we are only concerned with them. And when you think of clozapine and fluoxamine, etc., 1A2 also comes at clozapine. They come there. And it has been already discussed in the drug-drug interaction. So I don't want to give a lecture. Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Chindan?
No, sir. If anyone want to come live and ask question, they are free to do so. We have another 10-15 minutes. We can take up a few more questions related to this topic. You can unmute and ask question. We have Dr. Ranjan Dr. Madhavan sir, Dr. Ranjan Bhattacharya.
Yes, Chintan, thank you. Am I audible and visible?
Yes,
yes, Ranjan.
Yes, sir. Yes. Very good evening, sir. As
and
mentioned
good shot.
Yeah. As mentioned by Mr. Chintan, that you have really, thank you very much, sir, for arranging this webinar, and kudos to Dr. Avinash D'Souza, who batted like Virat Kohli, presented so well. I would like to highlight one or two things. I just don't want to ask any questions. A couple of articles we have also published in this context, along with my friend Dr. Sheshadri Shekhar Chatterjee in Asian Journal of Psychiatry. Among these, we have found that the two drugs that probably has not been discussed widely because of paucity of time, the hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin. As you all know that they have commonly been used, and hydroxychloroquine, the earlier part, has been used prophylactically especially to the healthcare workers. It is known to cause seizure, neutropenia, and myocardial toxicity. So clozapine with hydroxychloroquine as it is a very dreadful combo, and we have to go for the baseline QT interval. Preferably, it should be 440 millisecond in male and 470 millisecond in females. So coming to the ritonavir and lopinavir, they are contraindicated in patients, a certain group of patients, especially who are taking pimozide, though the pimozide is not a very widely available drug these days. But we have to be very cautious while using the drugs, which are cytochrome 3A4 inhibitors, especially the buspirone, carbamazepine, clonazepam, lurasidone. I have seen a patient with lurasidone and with an interaction or the possible interaction with the remdesivir. Also, the other drugs like trazodone, quetiapine has to be very careful. One aspect that I have found somewhere in the literature that while using the quetiapine, there is some guideline with when the quetiapine has to be administered, the possibility of the over sedation is there. So dose reduction is recommended by FDA. And among the other things that azithromycin, as you all know, that it prolongs the QT interval and increases the aminotransferase level. And most importantly, the remdesivir increases the liver enzymes. So remdesivir with a combination of the antiepileptic drug like sodium valproate and carbamazepine, they are very ominous to increase the liver enzymes. Just to finish one thing, I'd like to express just to be a bit a different opinion about the using of melatonin. I've been in duty in the COVID wards since the very first day. So initially, we have found that the melatonin is working very well, but its dose we have administered in the adult patients is around 10 milligram. So 10 milligram at the DLMO, there is a dim light melatonin onset which starts around 8 p.m. So it normalizes circadian rhythm and reduces anxiety, reduces the heightened anxiety state as well. It is not, in a true sense, it's not a virucidal drug, but it has a potent benefits about reducing the stress-related apoptosis and effect. It could be as effective as neuromodulator. So as during the cytochrome storm, the melatonin, when there is a rise of interleukin 1, interleukin 2, interleukin 6, TNF alpha, interferon gamma, VEGF, so on and so forth, there is an inflammation and the cytokines time is going on. Melatonin has been found to reduce the reactive oxygen species and oxygen enzyme, and helpful to reduce the oxidative stress. So this is a different experience. I've prescribed many patients with melatonin, and I found a very good result. Thank you, sir. Thank you for this.
Ranjan, can I comment it? Can I comment?
Yes, sure,
Ranjan, you are absolutely correct as far as chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine. Avinash didn't go into details because we have written extensively on that QTC prolongation and blood thing in our article along with Afzal Javed, which was published. That is why we didn't go. We are aware of it. Secondly, your azithromycin and erythromycin, it basically C3A4 NSAM and QTC prolongation. It has been known. That is why in antibiotics, instead of azithromycin, it is preferable to give either doxycycline or the cephalosporins. That is some people give it, but I prefer doxycycline. Okay, we know about it. We didn't want to go into details. Regarding the remdesivir, basically it is a substrate for C3A4, 2D6 and 2CH. That is there. But that metabolism is mediated by the hydrolyse activity. Hepatic symptoms may be there, but unfortunately, remdesivir didn't come to COVID therapy because of studies. It was only tried in Ebola vaccine, suddenly came here. We do not have enough literature on remdesivir, right? That is also only given only in severe cases because the mortality can be reduced. There is only one article. Okay, so it is supposed to be good, but it should not be given to, it has to be given, there are guidelines, but it has to be given intravenously, everything that you know, that all details you know. But we do not have enough literature. The reason is, it is just landed here. Remdesivir, everybody talks about it, and literature, especially about pharmacokinetics, pharmacodynamics, etc., the literature in COVID. Only recently it is coming, efficacy is questionable. Otherwise, I endorse your view. Melatonin is well known as an antioxidant. It will reduce the oxidative stress, immunological potentiation effect, etc., sedative potential, we are aware. Okay, thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank you, sir. Navina, just one question to you.
Yeah.
You have presented in one of your slides that you have mentioned that the tocilizumab is being a safe drug. Okay, in a perspective of the drug-to-drug interaction with the psychotropic medicines. But the tocilizumab drug is kept preserved at a very end stage.
Correct.
Very end stage.
Yes.
So it's a make or break drug.
Correct.
Two doses are given. So at that point of time, is it prudent to continue the psychotropic medicine in that trial? I'm wondering how it is possible on ethical perspective to continue psychotropic medicine with tocilizumab.
No, I agree totally. I mean, my whole aim was, not to say that we prescribe psychotropics, but my whole aim was to highlight that, if you're looking at drug interactions of COVID, drugs used in COVID, there are no drug interactions. Probably since it's also used sparingly, we don't have literature, maybe, we don't know, but otherwise, but overall, theoretically, it's considered to be very safe.
Okay, good enough.
Yeah, in Ranjan, in severe COVID, we are least bothered about the psychiatric problem. Okay, so in a delirious patient, toxemic state, better to avoid. Okay. Any questions? In then.
So there is one question that in COVID delirium, which is better as a first line, risperidone 1 mg BD or Oleans 2 mg, 2.5 mg BD. Again, we've already discussed this. Olanzapine is our preference compared to any of the other antipsychotics. Is there any psychotropic drug that provides protection against COVID at a receptor level? I think Dr. Mohandas would want to try and answer that, and also the use of chlorpromazine during COVID.
Chlorpromazine, better to avoid it because of the sedation therapy. We do not have the data. And Avinash has talked about the second generation. Now, regarding whether it will help the COVID antidepressants, there are articles which may produce in between. Avinash suggested the neuroinflammation can be reduced by antidepressants. That is the mechanism. Similarly, fluoxamine, there are some suggestions. Fluoxamine has been tried also not only here, even in blastomas, even brain tumors, so we will not go into detail, but as such for a COVID protection, we don't have it, except metformin. Recently, they are telling that metformin can be immunoprotective. And there are articles which are coming because in COVID, glucose levels go high. And which Avinash mentioned it, not only the brain insulin mechanism, which I don't want to elaborate much, but metformin is supposed to be very neuroprotective. Okay, thanks.
So in any patient on clozapine, do you find a protective role in reducing the severity of COVID? No, I don't think there's been any literature.
No.
Yeah. No. Yeah, that's all in the chat. Yeah, someone has asked whether risperidone versus paliperidone, what would be our choice? I've already mentioned paliperidone is supposed to be slightly safer compared to risperidone.
Yeah, but paliperidone is a molecule which is dressed up rather than risperidone. It has come in a pot and it is really excreted. That is important, not hepatically, that you have to be careful. So when there's a renal dysfunction, will you give paliperidone? That is all, everybody knows it. So preferably instead of risperidone, paliperidone is better.
Sir, recently, nowadays, most of the patients are also using this povidone iodine and gargles and other that will have any effect on?
I don't think so. I don't think there's any interaction of gargles with drugs, I don't think.
Or vaccines with anything?
Vaccine, I already mentioned there is no interaction as such.
People give even vitamin C, zinc, all these things. Just like that in COVID, even protective strategies. I think what is the use of all these things? Too much of vitamin C. Avinash knows it. In Bombay prescription, you will know how many vitamin C's. I don't think there is. It's supposed to improve the immunity. I don't think. Instead of that, you can take little bit lassi because of the lactobacillus. Because the gut microbial system activity, you can get tulsi, you can get ginger. Ginger, people have suggested even in Japanese literature, some of the herbal products people have tried. I mean, Japanese, even Chinese, they are telling. But we do not have enough evidence to recommend. Whatever we are having is, we have just talked.
Madhusudan sir, your comments.
We had a very good discussion between among all of us. I thank Mohandas, especially Dr. Ranjan also. He has put forward very informative points in this lecture. I once again thank Avinash for his excellent discussion on the topic. That's why I now no other comment to make because I'm not expert in this field.
Avinash is a good presenter. He's there with us for everything. Okay.
Chitramohan sir, your comments. Madhavan sir.
What can I say? I absolutely enjoyed your presentation, Dr. Avinash.
Thank you.
It was beautiful, it was exhaustive, and I learned a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Avinash,
Yes, sir.
it's one of the best lectures we have heard in two terms. One is the absolute timing of it. You rarely had somebody who finished it in 35-40 minutes. Kudos to that.
Thank you.
Because you respect time. And the second is, it's all points, just points. There's no room for gossip here and there and all that. So it's pakka, and therefore it's very, very impressive and very informative. Very informative.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
As usual, Dr. Mohandas always chooses the right speakers. So Madhusudan sir is there, teacher of teachers, very polite enough. We know that he knows more subject than quite a number of us. So it's been an excellent evening today, something that we'll remember for a long time. And God bless you, Dr. Avinash.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
Okay, Avinash, thank you very much.
Right, sir.
Thank you very much, boss. I will be sending you the articles that you are told, the slides.
Thank
And
you,
you
sir.
have to draft it. You have to
Thank you,
draft
sir.
it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Chintan, can you just suggest next one and the speakers? How to select psychotropic in diabetic and metabolic comorbidity? Who is speaking? I think from Lucknow, no?
Chintan sir, you are muted. Please unmute.
Chintan and
Sir. This is on
Ali
by Dr. Amrit Pat Joshi from Orissa.
Amar Parjosh. Yeah.
I was on mute. I didn't realize. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Madhu, happy to see you. I think you are the leader, man. Without you, it's not complete.
No, I don't think this is
No, you have to be there because we have planned all this program. You are the course director. And whenever if you are not that much signed up, you have to really honor us. Okay, that is important.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.
Ranjan, see
Yes,
you.
sir.
See
Thank you so much, sir. Good night, everyone.
Chitra, okay.
See you next week.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, good night. Madhav, good night. Okay.
Night, boss.
Okay, boss.